It's D'Lo and James Ham here because Kenny's just gone. It's a 49ers Friday brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil's. We welcome in 1320 Kings insider James Ham. We were semi-joking about this a minute ago. It's the Kings and the Rockets tonight, and like everyone is like, oh, tough game for the Kings tonight.
I think
Tough stretch of basketball ahead.
Yeah, every game is a tough game. Hey, look, there's Kenny. It's like Kenny's like he's like, Vivek, have you met my friend Roger Craig? And then boom, you turn around and Vivek is gone. He's thrown out the Acme circle and jumped through it, and he's just flat out gone.
Yeah, for those who are on the radio, Kenny is now rejoining the program.
Yeah. I think as a policy, no one should ever bet the Sacramento Kings. I don't think it matters who they're playing, win or lose. I would bet against them when they play the Milwaukee Bucks next week. But outside of that, I'm not betting for or against the Kings on any given night. I just act like that they're not on the card. If I was a betting man, that's just the way this team is. There is no embracing success. There are no lows too low or highs too high. It's just that's who they are.
That's ugly, man. We were playing the two of the three worst teams in the game, and we can't even, as a fan base or people that cover the team, say, all right, well, get three in a row. Like, we're all deathly afraid to say get three in a row and try to get on the right track. And I mean, that's just
Kenny, that would be 4 in a row. And if Fox would have hit the jumper, the potential for 5 in a row. That's what's so strange about this season. Like it's always too high, always too low. It feels that way every single day, where you're just waiting to see what's next. So hopefully they make changes. I mean, we're getting down to the wire here. We only got a couple of weeks left, and it's about go time.
So for those who missed the lengthy Twitter thread, and for those who haven't had a chance to listen to the latest edition of the Kings Beat, and I strongly encourage those watching to watch the latest edition of the Kings Beat, become a subscriber to the Kings Beat YouTube channel, and you can see James's new Corgi make an appearance on the podcast. Explain why you think it was wise for the Kings to kind of sit this Cam Reddish thing out after seeing what the New York Knicks did to acquire him.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly complex, but I mean, what it really boils down to is that Cam isn't worth like a top 10 pick. He's not at this point, like in his development and his contract status and who he is as a player. He's not worth an unrestricted first round draft pick from the Sacramento Kings. And so if he's not worth the unrestricted first round pick, he's probably worth a restricted first round pick. But then what are those restrictions? And to be honest with you, it doesn't even matter what those restrictions are. That's what I think the gist of my long Twitter thread. It doesn't matter if you're protecting that for like it's top 15 or top 18. That doesn't matter. It's that there's this rule called the Stepien rule. And it's named after an executive in the late 80s who decided to trade away all of his picks, I believe, like consecutively. So you're not allowed in the NBA to trade consecutive years of your picks. Now, if you have an additional pick, you can trade consecutive years. So if, say, the Kings had picked up a first-round pick from someone else, and so now they have 3 picks over the next 2 years, then you can trade consecutive picks, because as long as you have a pick in a season, you're okay. So what that means is that if the Kings extended, let's say, a top 10 protected lottery pick for Cam Reddish, and that means that they can't trade this year's pick or next year's pick, right? Because the Stepien rule, you can't trade back-to-back years. So if you've already traded this one, you can't trade next year. Well, if it's restricted, now it could relay next year as well, because you're going to have some restrictions on that as well, which means you're not sure if you're trading this year's pick or next year's pick, which means because of the Stepien rule, the third year you can't trade as well. So again, if you're the Kings, you're not going to give up let's say a top 10 restricted, a protected pick for Cam Reddish in the 2021 draft. And in 2022 draft, you're like, okay, we want it top 10 as well, because I'm not giving up just an unrestricted pick for him. And so now you can't trade the next year. And, oh, wait, now you can't trade the year after that as well. Because if you don't know if you're trading this year's or next year's, then you're going to have restrictions on the following year, which means that it goes to the fourth year. So it's this trickle down thing, which, to be honest with you, we saw with the Charlotte pick. So the pick that they got for Reddish is exactly what I'm talking about. It's a pick that literally has 4 years of protection. And those 4 years of protection means that they cannot trade their pick for the next 5 seasons. And that's not good, because if Reddish isn't like the end all be all, if he's not like, if he doesn't become really good, you can't trade your picks to go try to improve in a different way. Now, the Kings might not trade their pick. That they could go, hey, it doesn't really matter. We're never going to trade our picks anyways. But the fact that you can't trade your pick, that you can't throw in like 2 first-round picks in a deal for a player like Ben Simmons, or you can't make a trade for one of these other players that you really like. Well, is Reddish worth that? Is he worth giving up the opportunity to make any other trade, not only this year, but potentially 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road that involves a draft pick? And I think the answer to that is that no, he's not good enough for that. Now, if you had a second first round pick to extend out, then that's fine. You know, if you would have traded last year, if you would have traded Harrison Barnes and took back a 2022 pick that was, say, a mid-20s pick or late teens pick, that's fine. The Kings probably could have offered that up, and they probably would have got Reddish, because that other pick could never get relayed. But the fact that there are these rules in place about trading your picks, it really does restrict what you can do. So unless the Kings were going to offer up a player that made sense for Atlanta and Cam Reddish made sense for the Kings, then you kind of had to bow out once you knew they were getting a first round pick for him.
So the way you explained it is perfect. It makes perfect sense. Like, and I understand not wanting to be tied up for 5 seasons potentially with this pick. Here's what I'll say about that. I think Monty could have done this. We don't know, but that's worth a discussion. Like, if that's what the Hawks were asking for, as for negotiation comes, I can't do that. But what do you want? Do you want to do a pick swap? Tell me what you think about this. Let's talk about the 2023 first round pick. I can't do that for this year. I can't do 2022 because it's looking too bleak. But let's start with 2023 and put some restriction. Like, there's ways to work through that. I think I understand what everybody says about Cam Reddish, where he's not necessarily worth it or anything like that. He could be a guy that is hurt every year, averages 8 points a game for his career. But I think he also could be a guy that averages 18 points a game in his career, given the right situation and being in the right situation and given the opportunity. And if you're the Sacramento Kings, I think that's the type of guy you take a chance on. It is no guarantee, but that's the type of guy with that type of upside that you take a chance on, and you exhaust almost all possibilities to try and make that trade happen, especially for what the compensation ended up being. Like, I ain't saying give up Halliburton for him. Like, Kevin Knox is going to be out of the league at the end of the year, and they moved on from him. So
yeah,
I would.
We got one of those,
right? That's tailor made for. I would have definitely took that chance and tried to make that work without what you talked about, the 5-year potential provisions on that first pick.
Yeah, and I would respond with this. Okay, so let's say they make that deal and that Cam Reddish goes into this summer and they don't extend him. And then at the end of next season, they extend a qualifying offer, but he becomes a restricted free agent. And let's say someone goes out and does something silly, like gives Cam Reddish a 4-year, $60 million contract or a 4-year 72, which is what Bogdanovich got. And at the end of 2022, the 2022-23, going into that draft, you don't even know if you're going to be able to keep him. And let's say you lose him, and oh, by the way, you don't have your first round pick because you already traded it for him out in advance. So I think it's it's always more complicated. So even if you're trading your 2023 pick, that literally means, and if you're giving just an unprotected 2023 pick, which this team should never do because there's no guarantee that this team is going to be horrible in 2023. But if you're going to trade your 2023, you can't trade your 2022 and you can't trade your 2024. And so that's the problem. It's the Stepien rule always comes into play where you can't trade the picks on either side of it. And so it always becomes like, how much is that player worth? If it's a game changer and you think you're getting over the top, or if you're already a team that's good, if you're a team that's in the top of the, say you're a team in the top 5 or 6 in the standings, and you know that that pick is going to be like 18 to 25. Well, that's fine, but that's not the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings are a historically bad team. They have a very good shot of setting the all-time record here of 16 consecutive seasons without making the playoffs. You can't give up draft picks unless you got a sure thing. And a sure thing isn't a guy who's averaged 11 points a season over the last 2 years and who's gotten injured quite a few times. That's a different deal. Now, again, we could talk about DeAndre Hunter. If they're willing to talk about DeAndre Hunter, then maybe we start climbing up closer to value for a first round pick, an unprotected pick. But even still, I got to know exactly what's happening with the rest of my trades. And if the Reddish deal is the day of, if it's February 10th, that's a much different trade than right now. Because if it's February 10th and we already know that Ben Simmons went somewhere else and Sabonis went somewhere else and Siakam's not getting traded and Miles Turner's not getting traded, all of these things are already happening or have already happened, then sure, maybe a Reddish play at that moment makes more sense, but he's already off the board. So at that point, it's too late. So you get what I'm saying? If he's a consolation prize, then that's one thing, but that's not one.
I understand, but I think, and this goes to my second point, I think they're holding out for a deal that I don't think is going to happen. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I help me out because I looked around the league here and I just realistically, guys that are looked at as game changers that could be available are available. We're not even sure what's really going on. But all I could come up with was John Collins, Ben Simmons, CJ McCollum, and Kristaps Porzingis. Like, I don't think the Sabonis thing is real, or at least like for what they're at. Like, I don't think the Kings got enough to make that happen. Siakam, I used to think that was happening. That's not happening. Like,
I don't think so.
These guys that are, looked at as potential game changers, I don't think they're there. I think they're going to turn around on the February 10th or whatever and be like, well, we were holding out for this magical deal that's not where the league is at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It very well could happen that way. I do think that the Kings are going to be involved on at least a couple of these larger deals, even if they're a third party on a larger deal, even if they start collecting assets so they can do something like what we just saw from the Knicks. I think that's one of the bigger things that we should look at. It's that you weren't able to trade Marvin Bagley at the deadline last year for a first round pick. And I guess that means that there wasn't anyone who wanted him and was willing to give up a first round pick for him. But even still, I mean, the Kings had a bunch of second round picks as well. Why not throw in a second round pick with Bagley and try to move up to a first round pick in the future and pick up a pick like what the Knicks have? And look, I think one of the worst things about this whole entire situation is that it's Scott Perry who collected all of these assets for the Knicks. So the Knicks are sitting here. They have like 7 or 8 second round picks. They've got 2 or 3 extra first round picks. That's Scott Perry, who was in the Sacramento Kings front office for like 2 or 3 months, made a huge impact on the front office with Vlade, and then took the Knicks job and the Kings let him go. And then the Kings replaced him with Brandon Williams. That might be one of the all-time worst trade-offs that we've ever seen in the history of this team, to lose Scott Perry and to replace him with Brandon Williams. That's just, I mean, like, going back now, that's worse than some of these draft picks they've missed on. It's worse than I had a better trade 2 days ago, with DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, it is so incredibly impactful because what that did is he was a proponent of drafting Bagley, really high on Bagley, which some of the other guys were high on Bagley as well instead of Luka. But also he was a guy that didn't want Dave Yeager around and really pushed to get Yeager out of town. And so like even we always talk about how this isn't just one gigantic mistake that the Kings made over the course of the last 15 years that have put them in this situation. It is a series of small mistakes, even if they're bigger, but in the grand scheme of NBA world, they're smaller mistakes, but they lead to these other mistakes. And that's what's really tough, you know. If again, if you keep Bogdanovich last offseason, number one, you had a trade chip. Number two, you would have made the play-in game. You missed the play-in game by 2 games. There's no way Bogdanovich doesn't have a positive impact on that roster. There's just no way. Like we watched him play. He was one of your best players. He was your 5-tool player. People say, well, what about Tyrese? Tyrese with him would have been really good. You know, so there are all of these little near misses that we can point to over the course of time. And all of them add up to this mess that the Kings are currently in. But again, at least they do have a bunch of draft picks right now, and they have the ammunition in the right deal to make a gigantic splash right here. They've got the contracts, they've got enough quality players, and they have all of their first round picks, which, you know, I don't know how many you're willing to give up for Ben Simmons or for Sabonis if he becomes available. But you got plenty. You got plenty to offer. That's for sure.
You're listening to D'Lo and Casey along with 1320 Kings insider James Ham here on ESPN 1320 KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by last year's Elk Grove Dodge. I'm never going to see the bogey thing the way that you do. I just don't believe you could re-sign him. Like I know he had a stretch. Kings fans were so happy to see when he was shooting well in the playoffs. He's missed a ton of time as an Atlanta Hawk. If he is a Sacramento King missing the same exact amount of time, this fan base is going ape nuts over it.
No, like, I mean, that's possible.
And I just, much like Buddy, I mean, I would rather have Bogey than Buddy, just like everybody else. But I know Buddy stays on the floor. But two, you can't trade Buddy. How are you going to be able to trade? But I don't think we just the whole, we figure it out later. It just isn't working. You ain't figured nothing out.
Yeah, but you can't trade Buddy for equal value. I think that's what the Kings have tried to do. They've tried to trade Buddy for value. I mean, we saw the deal that they almost had done with the Los Angeles Lakers. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm as shocked as anybody that they almost had a deal done for Montrezl Harrell and Kyle Kuzma. Well, if you take a step back and you're trading Buddy without trying to get back that much, there have been deals, but they're deals that don't work for what the Kings are trying to do. They're deals that they can't take to Vivek and say, we're getting equal value or we're getting close to equal value. If you sign Bogdanovich, you can now take 50 cents on the dollar, 70 cents on the dollar for Buddy Hield. You don't have to look for 80 or 90 cents on the dollar for Buddy Hield, or even like the Lakers deal to me is like $1.25 on the dollar for Buddy Hield. I mean, at least I mean, that's like some Canadian exchange rate right there. Yeah. Like I'm all over that. Like, and I love Montrezl Harrell, but
it's like, I don't. If it seems too good to be true,
yeah,
it is.
Yeah. And I don't love Kuzma, but I still give me that deal like all day long. I would have been like racing down to like meet those guys at the airport. And I wouldn't even like the other guy's got to call an Uber and get himself to the airport. Just like, the deal is done. Let's close this thing out right now. I'm going to go fly down and get them myself. Like, yeah. So again, I think it's these moments in time that we always talk about that change the direction of this franchise, but they change it like in a lot of times it's permanently. Like there is no way to get out of the situation where you lost your starting shooting guard for nothing. And does he miss time? Sure, he misses time. But again, we don't know that he would miss the same amount of time here in Sacramento. Like injuries happen at different times at different positions. I honestly believe that the Kings would have been a much better team last year with both of them and with Tyrese. And I think they would have been just
agree
fine.
About last year. I just don't know what you do moving forward with all that money going to those. Like, because now De'Aaron's money is kicked in, and you got Buddy, Bogey. Like, that's a lot of money.
Luxury tax team?
What's that?
Luxury tax team if you keep Bogey?
No, because you might not do something like sign Mo Harkless or sign, bring in Tristan Thompson. Like that's not that. Like there's plenty of ways that you could have adjusted this thing and made it look different. And again, Bogey had the ability to play the three. He played the three a lot for Sacramento. And I think 3-guard sets with Bogdanovich look much different than 3-guard sets with Buddy Hield, or even Buddy Hield and Bogdanovich in 3-guard sets. Again, just adding Bogdanovich and his ability to play the three and be a secondary creator. That's the biggest thing this team is missing. I mean, they could use more defenders and everything else, but if you really look and see what's happening, especially over the last, since Alvin Gentry's taken over, their offense has gone in the tank, which kills their defense. Because if you're not making shots, then you're not setting your defense. And so it's part of the same exact cycle. You have to have good offense because good defense, good offense leads to good offense. The Kings have never had both things in one night, except for, maybe the Lakers game where I thought they played really solid on both ends of the court.
Monty spoke today. Was that, I mean, I'm not even going to get at him because Damian are both of the belief there's not much to say, or he could say in that forum. But I guess my question to you is, was that a damage control type of deal, in your opinion?
I mean, damage control, maybe. I mean, he clearly has not had a presence in the media world at all. I think I've spoken to him more than most people have, and it's always off the record. And so, I mean, there's a lot of value to that for me because I'm always reading between the lines, and so there is value to those. But I mean, we hadn't seen him since Luke got fired, and that's a long time, and at some point he's got to be out here telling people that he's making moves, that he's doing what's right for this franchise, and that's changing, the core, which we've talked about. But I think people who say actions speak louder than words, which I've seen a bunch on Twitter, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, and you're going on a friendly space, when you're taking that interview, and that's kind of a lot of what we've seen. I thought he was really, really good at the end of last season, McNair, when he took ownership for the fact that the team, failed to make the playoffs. And to be honest with you, a big reason why they failed to make the playoffs last year was on him. He just didn't provide, like no coach could have ran out there with 6 guys and made the postseason. Even a 7th or an 8th guy would have made a big difference, but he just didn't get those guys until the trade deadline with 25 games left in the season. So again, I think he needs to be more visible, and I don't think it always has to be in that setting where you're going on, a team partner and spouting some words. It's like if he were to go on the pre and post game show, what, is someone going to hit him with something there? I don't think so. And so again, for me as a writer and as someone who covers the team and who, I do have inside information most of the time, the real value is always looking someone in the eye and reading what they're telling you without saying it to you. And even if Monty doesn't give you hardly anything in a press conference, that doesn't mean that if you're perceptive, you can't pull a lot of stuff out. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it helped, to be honest with you. I think everyone just looked at it as like, okay, like what was that? I really didn't. It didn't change my mind on anything. The only thing he kept saying is, we're not going to sleep until we get this thing right. It's like, all right, we're 18 months in. Like, you still haven't done anything. So yeah, tough stuff.
What's the worst thing the Kings could do right now? From an organizational standpoint, like Monty, what's the worst thing that he could do right now?
I mean, he could make a bad deal for sure. Like, I mean, He could trade away picks for something that doesn't work out at all. I think that's always like, even looking at this new iteration of the Philadelphia 76ers, they want someone to take Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. And there are a lot of ways that trade makes sense. There, like, I can work a couple of trades where I think the Kings can insulate themselves from a complete disaster, but it's still a huge risk. I mean, you're taking a risk on a guy who melted down in the playoffs, hasn't played in 7 months, and has yo-yoed with his team and said he's not going to show up, and we're almost 50 games into the season and he hasn't played. And oh, by the way, Tobias Harris makes, basically, he's a slightly better player than Harrison Barnes, and he makes twice as much money, more than twice going forward. So you're looking at a player that makes almost $80 million a year. So again, I think you could make a trade where you gave up way too much to get that. If I'm saving a team, and I did the math, if you were to trade them a package that included Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield, Tristan Thompson, and either Marvin Bagley or Marvin Bagley traded somewhere and get them a player that makes more sense to them. So let's say you trade Marvin Bagley to Portland for Robert Covington, and Robert Covington goes back to Philadelphia. If that's my 4 players that are going, and then they've got to match, they can throw in some young players just to match roster spots, right? Isaiah Joe, and they've got a couple of players that they could just toss in. If you make a deal like that, and then you throw in 2 first-round picks, that to me is a really good deal for both sides, because number one, they get at least 3 rotational players that step in and help them right now in Barnes and Hield and Covington. They also get 2 first-round picks. So I'm giving them the 2020, 22 and 24, right? And do I do a top 3? Maybe. But I also might just say, look, if I want to get the deal done, no restrictions on it. I'm just going for it, and this is a deal. But on top of all of the things that we're talking about for Philadelphia right there, Philadelphia would save over the next 3 seasons $131 million in cap space. It's that much. So that cap space has a value as well. So if I'm basically saving $131 million, and the only thing I'm really doing is I'm switching out Tobias Harris for Harrison Barnes and adding Buddy and Covington. Because at this point, like, we all know, like, Ben Simmons is never going to play for them again. Like, it's over, it's done. So again, like, I think that in a deal like that, I'm game. But the problem that you have is, what if we start taking out a Buddy Hield and a Tristan Thompson, and we start putting in a De'Aaron Fox? Now it's too much, especially if you're giving up the draft picks. So what you can't do is you can't give up the draft stock and save them all this money, because that doesn't fly. And so anyway, I think that the Kings have some options here. I hope they don't do something silly that hamstrings the franchise forever. Like, and I think in one of those deals, like, it's the deal that you wanted. It's like, I'm not letting Monty make that deal where he's going to tie up my draft for the next 4 years. That's just not what I'm going to let him do, because then if there is a next guy next year or the year after, now he's stuck. He's stuck like, like the Vlade situation, where again, they traded Omri Caspi and a 1st-round pick for JJ Hickson in 2012. And then that pick didn't get relayed until 2017. And so all of those drafts where the Kings drafted Thomas Robinson and Jimmer and Stauskas and McLemore, they couldn't trade those picks. They couldn't trade out. They could trade down. They could trade up. They could trade for another pick. They couldn't trade those picks because of the stupid JJ Hickson trade that lasted. JJ Hickson didn't even make it to the end of the season. They waived him after the trade deadline because he was such a detriment behind the scenes, and said, get out of here. And so they got stuck for 4 or 5 years without being able to move their picks. And again, that's the De'Aaron Fox pick. We talked about this once before. That pick was, if the Kings made the playoffs that year, if they were an 11, 12, or 13, then it got relayed to the Chicago Bulls. They traded DeMarcus Cousins when they were a game out of the playoffs, tanked the rest of the season. That pick fell to number 8. It moved up to number 3, up to number 2. And then the pick swap for the other trade that Vlade did dropped the pick back to 5. That pick should have been relayed as part of the JJ Hickson trade. Look at how that could have impacted this franchise for, I mean, already did because they couldn't do anything with their picks forever. But look how it could have impacted and even ruined any goodness that the Kings have right now, which is De'Aaron Fox. Yeah.
That lineup of draft picks that you just like flippantly threw out is so incredible. It's so incredible that Thomas Robinson, Nick Skowski, those are the Kings' first round picks in successive years. It's just incredible. It's ineptitude on so many like this isn't. That's the crazy part about all of this, Ham. It's not one person. It's the entire freaking. It's built into the grain of this organization. Like this organization needs either a soul cleansing or a goddamn exorcism.
Yeah,
it needs one of them. Like it's a freaking disaster.
Yeah, I mean it's everybody realistically too. It's not one guy. That's
what I mean.
Yeah, I mean Jeff Petrie,
ownerships and general all of it. It's people, so many people.
Yeah, Jeff Petrie drafted Jimmer over Klay Thompson and Kawhi Leonard. Like, and then the next year, next year or the year before, he drafted Thomas Robinson over Damian Lillard, who again was like the guy. They were going to draft Damian Lillard the night before. He'll tell you that. Ben McLemore, they draft instead of CJ McCollum, which came like a couple of picks later. Steven Adams, a couple of picks later, and Giannis Antetokounmpo was like 16 when they drafted Ben McLemore. Like it's all of these like draft picks are a lottery. It's a crapshoot, but it's all of these little mistakes, and it's so many different people that have done it. You can't just point at one person and Vlade Divac's made a bunch of mistakes. He left the team in a better place than when he took it over. Like, could it have been way better? Heck yeah, it could have been way better. But he also didn't set them back years. He didn't trade away multiple first round picks for the future where, you're hamstrung now, or this guy here comes in with almost a clean slate, except for, some salary cap issues that he played a part in with the De'Aaron Fox thing. But also, he hasn't gotten rid of any of the major salary either.
I'll ask a strange question that I don't even believe myself, but I'll ask you anyway. Wednesday night was pretty cool. Wednesday night, I saw that team play differently than I've seen in a while. And that includes wins, like the Miami win. Like they did some good stuff, but it just felt like how they played in that Lakers game was like different. It was like the best case scenario, what we expected maybe all year long. Is there any way that this could jumpstart this team?
You know what? I'll answer it the way that I think it should be answered. You better not believe that. Like, do not let that game change.
Great answer.
Do not let that game convince you of something that this team is not. They showed you who they were the first 44 games. Don't believe game 45. Like that's it. Like
that second half was about as good as they played all season, right? Like I thought they played really well. It
was spectacular to watch. Fans fighting in the stands. That showed me that they're like, even that showed me that like Kings fans were like, we had enough. Game on. We're winning this game, and I'm going to beat you up. That's what's happening here. We're taking back our arena. I think it was a really, really good night for this team. And I'll even point out this. There's 12,100 fans, and 8,000 of them were Lakers fans, at least. That's an embarrassment. But that's what you're faced with. Like, you have to do something to bring people back. You got to swing for the fences to bring people back. You can't do something desperate and you certainly can't set the franchise back years by doing something stupid.
Hmm.
And we'll know it right away. Like if someone does something stupid here, you'll know it. But at the same time, like I could see them waiting to make any big move until they play the Bucks, and like the day before they play the Bucks, make the big move. Let's win 3 games here, and then hopefully get some momentum, and then let's make a huge trade. So then that way we already know we're going to lose to the Bucks, and now we're jumping out the other side. You know what I mean? We're ready. We got Tobias Harris, or we've got Sabonis, or we've got whatever it is we've got. And again, like whether any of these trades happen, I think that might be the one thing that Monty said that was 100% accurate. We only hear about 1% of the trades, and probably less than 1% of the trades we hear about go through. So we're looking at like the multiplier, like we only see a drop of all the things that have been discussed. and and so there are a lot more things going on than what we think. Just like no one saw DeLon Wright for the Corey Joseph for DeLon Wright. No one saw the Terrence Davis trade. No one even saw the Mo Harkless deal. Not until it was done. It was like, hey, that's interesting. You know, they went out and did something, but my point is that no one saw those deals coming.
Didn't see the Tristan Thompson deal coming either.
No, that's true. Yeah, but also I think my point is that everything that we're hearing, like most of that stuff's not going to happen, and there's going to be something else that happens that looks totally different. Rarely do you ever see someone nail a draft or nail a trade to the T, where every player is going where you thought they would go. It's just that's not the way it usually works.
Hey, Ham, we're going to be talking about this next week, so I need to have you on the record now. Niners or Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be pulling for the Niners. So, I mean, I'm a Niners fan. Like, do I know who's going to win that game? I don't. Like I mentioned the other day, like if the 49ers defensive line shows up and is just all over Dak, then I believe they win. Because I don't think the 49ers defensive backfield can hold up against Dak if they don't have all kinds of pressure. So
fair enough.
If I said, James, you have to pick a winner in one of these games, and I gave you the option to pick the winner of the 49ers Cowboys game or the Kings Rockets game tonight, which one are you taking?
It would depend on how much money's on the line. Like if I had to make a choice that was going to equate to me winning money, I would bet on the Niners over the Kings beating the Rockets.
That's
man.
Now, but do I think that they're going to lose? Do I think the Kings are going to lose? I think that they're going to have some carryover, and I think they'll be okay.
Okay.
So I think they'll be okay. Then I think they'll be okay the next 3 games. But again, like I'm never going to say if they don't go 3-0 in this streak, you know, because the chance of that is just so slim because we know they are who they are.
And that's why I want to ask you this. And you got to get on the road. You got to get to GNC. Did that game come out the way that it did, the Lakers game, simply because they shot well? And everything else like fell into place, whether it was effort, whether it was defense, whatever. Was it all because the shot was falling for them?
No, because they scored 70 points in the paint. Like if you're going to score 70 points in the paint, that means you dictated the flow of the game. That means that you did the one thing that you should have done. They're going to run LeBron James out there as their center. That's fine. Don't go post up a big man thinking you're going to score a bunch of points with a big man. Run at him. There's only one of him. He can't defend everybody. And once you get De'Aaron Fox running downhill and then the rest of the team running downhill on him, that's how you won that game. So
it's almost like that should be their philosophy every night.
Maybe it should be. Yeah, like I've said it so many times. Like, why are you shooting so many threes when you aren't hitting any threes? Like, and you know, this team does make a lot of threes. They do hit a decent percentage. They're not the worst 3-point shooting team I've ever seen. But certainly the fact that they have, you know, multiple players that can get to the rim at any time, that, you know, that's why I think, again, that Terrence Davis, I'm playing Terrence Davis over Buddy Hield in some of these situations because I know Terrence will go to the rack.
Real quick, like 10 seconds. You might have already talked about it. No Rashawn tonight.
No, I'm almost positive no Rashawn tonight. There's a good chance he'll be back on Sunday or on Wednesday, but yeah, he's been out for so long, between the eye injury and then he came back for 4 games and was just barely starting to get back in shape, and then boom, he's got this long stretch again. It's an accumulation of too much time missed. I think with 16, 17 games at this point. And man, the Kings need him so desperately because he's such an integral part of both sides of the court. He's their best pick and roll man on offense, their best pick and roll man on defense. He's the guy that can defend perimeter players at the center position. Yeah, he's missed horribly with this team.
James Ham, 1320 Kings Insider.